Did general manager Brandon Beane build a roster in 2024 that had the capacity to win the Super Bowl? We're putting every decision under the microscope today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Well, folks, welcome in. It's time to reflect a little bit and assess and look at what went down for the Buffalo Bills in 2024. We'll be doing that for the next few days here on the podcast. And I want to start with general manager Brandon Beane and really assess all of the decisions that he made in putting together this 2024 roster. We're going to consider the subtractions, both players that he released or didn't bring back in free agency, the extensions, the veteran free agent additions, the 2024 NFL draft, in-season moves, and then we will really identify where it went right and where he nailed it and where he fell short and missed. So let's do it. Now let's start by acknowledging the lens that you have to assess Brandon Beane through. Obviously, the NFL is a limited resource environment. The salary cap is real. Folks, if you listen to analysts that tell you that the salary cap is not real, well, I'd really question if they understand how the salary cap actually works, because it's absolutely real. There is a limited amount of resources available to every team to use, and that includes a spending limit through the salary cap. And so the Bills entered the 2024 offseason $50 million over the cap. They had to shed $50 million worth of cap commitments just to become cap compliant, much less actually add to the roster. You have to be mindful of that. Now, look, of course, Brandon Beane is in control of the salary cap, so, of course, he's responsible for wherever it is. So that's definitely something to be mindful of. But obviously the Bills had a great run with that nucleus, and it got expensive and in some cases expired. And, well, it kind of comes a point in time where you have to transition, which is exactly what the Bills did. They absolutely had a soft reset this offseason. And through that transition, a lot of veteran mainstays the Bills had to move on from. Of course, the Bills got to the AFC Championship game and lost by 3. And so I think that's an important lens for us to consider. This was a transitional year, and the expectations were different for this team, right? The last couple of years, the Bills entered this season and everybody was picking them to win the Super Bowl favorites. And this year, you had some people that thought the Bills would be good, but a lot of other people saying, well, this is the Dolphins year. This is the Jets year. It's going to be a down year for the Bills. That stuff absolutely happened. Yours truly said, I think this is a 10 or 11 win team. And my expectation was that they'd probably get to the divisional round and lose. So in a lot of ways, this team exceeded my expectations for this year. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not room to look back and reflect and say, yeah, you know what? These are things that were probably not the best decision to be made. And so there'll be some of that, and there'll be some victories to celebrate along the way. So let's get into it. Let's start by considering the subtractions, the players that were not retained, players that the Bills let walk in free agency, and then the players the Bills released. So the Bills let walk wide receiver Gabe Davis. He signed a 3-year, $39 million deal in Jacksonville. He lasted 10 games before a season-ending injury and caught 20 passes. Exactly what I thought it would happen with Gabe Davis. Not the injury part. I certainly don't root for that, but not a meaningful part of their offense despite paying him a pretty significant amount of money. Great job there letting him walk. Leonard Floyd went to the 49ers, signed a 2-year, $20 million deal, had a pretty good season, 8.5 sacks. But for the Bills, as a team that was looking to get younger and cheaper and, really couldn't continue aligning with veterans that are north of 30 that are on the downside of their career, despite him having a good season and despite feeling like the Bills could have used some more pass rush, I don't look at that with any regrets that he didn't come back to Buffalo. Latavius Murray didn't sign anywhere. Dane Jackson went to the Carolina Panthers, 2 years, $8.5 million. And he started a few games, got injured, and then never got his job back. And the Panthers defense was literally the worst they've ever put on the field in the history of the organization. That was not a good move for Carolina, and a perfectly fine move to let him walk. Here's one that stings. Poona Ford went to the Chargers, 1 year, $1.8 million. Had a great season. Absolutely had a great season. If you watch the Chargers at all, you could feel his impact. And I don't know what happened there. I was excited when the Bills signed him. You heard me talk about Poona Ford and how excited I was. And then, not only did he not get on the field, the Bills had injuries to Daquan Jones. And the Bills are signing like Linval Joseph off the street, and he's playing over Poona Ford. So I don't know what happened in Buffalo. But obviously disappointing. And he goes to the Chargers and has a good season, and he'll probably be a pretty high-ticket free agent this offseason. So I feel like that was a miss. They didn't bring back Jordan Phillips. He found his way back regardless, and obviously struggled when he was with the Giants and Cowboys. Tim Settle, this one's weird. He left to sign with Houston, 2 years, $6 million. He did pretty much nothing for 2 seasons in Buffalo. Then he goes to Houston and has a good season. 5 sacks, starts 11 games, 10 tackles for loss, 10 quarterback hits. He didn't touch those numbers in 2 seasons combined in Buffalo. So I guess Tim Settle's a guy that probably benefited from, let's be honest, a better talent collection around him, especially on the defensive line in Houston. And that probably unlocks a player like Tim Settle, who's a rotational type player, but can play a little bit above his weight class when he's got a lot of good players around him. And he was able to settle in, and looks like he's been a good player for them. Linval Joseph, he wound up signing late with the Cowboys. Doesn't matter. Kyle Allen winds up being a backup quarterback for Pittsburgh. They had quarterback problems all year long. Trent Sherfield went to the Vikings, was the same type of depth receiver, special teams player. Shaq Lawson, I think he was on the Panthers practice squad for a minute. Tyrell Dodson, he went to Seattle, 1 year, $4.6 million. Started a handful of games, got cut, signed with the Dolphins, and actually had a decent little stretch there with the Dolphins late in the season. But I don't know that Tyrell Dodson would have made much of a difference. And, I think he wanted to go explore his opportunities to be a guy. And then, of course, Tyler Medikevich went back to Pittsburgh and did his special teams thing. I think overall, the players that Brandon Beane let walk, I don't think you look at that list and feel like there was a lot of mistakes. Maybe Poona Ford, but obviously that just wasn't going to happen in Buffalo for whatever reason. I'll never understand it. But he wasn't really going to be a thing in Buffalo. And then whatever's going on with Tim Settle, he had 2 years to make an impact in Buffalo. And I think the talent around him in Houston really unlocked something. Then there was the players that they released. And the Bills, of course, like I said, entered the offseason $50 million over the cap. So they had to say goodbye to some players. And I'll be honest, looking back at this list, I think Brandon Beane did a good job of navigating who to let go. Saron Neal, $2.88 million freed up by letting him go. Signed with the Dolphins, did his special teams thing, provided some depth on defense, but I don't think that he is a player that the Bills missed. I don't think the season would have been any different if Saron Neal was around. Jordan Poyer, the Bills freed up $5.72 million by letting him go. Obviously, he was a bit of a disaster for Miami this year. Mitch Morse, here's one, $8.5 million freed up. And Mitch Morse was fine for Jacksonville this year, but I don't think the Bills missed him. I think the Bills' offensive line transition went very, very well. And, for a player that, in Mitch Morse, who I think I'll always respect, and I think he's a good player, I don't think the Bills missed him. Deontay Hardy, the Bills freed up $4.2 million by letting him go. Probably a mistake to sign him originally, but certainly you didn't miss his impact. He went to the Ravens and was injured for most of the season. Nyheim Hines, the Bills cut him, freed up $4.7 million. He pretty much did nothing for Cleveland this year. And then Tre'Davious White, the Bills let him go, freed up $10.2 million, and he goes to the Rams, lasted like 4 games. They released him. Then he caught on with the Ravens and was like a rotational player. But I don't think the Bills missed Tre'Davious White. And then, of course, they made 2 trades. They traded away Ryan Bates for a 5th-round pick. Ryan Bates went to the Bears, got injured, then really couldn't hold on to a starting job. And the Bills obviously didn't miss him. Their offensive line depth was just fine this year. And they traded away that Stefon Diggs guy. Stefon Diggs, a 5 and a 6 for a 2. And Diggs was like an okay player for the first stretch of the season. Then he unfortunately suffered an ACL tear and wasn't able to help the Texans any further. But, I think you can still see in Diggs last year, a perfectly fine player, but not the same level of dynamic vertical skill, not the same type of dynamic route running, kind of more of a savvy veteran at this point, as opposed to, oh my goodness, this guy is putting guys in the blender. You got to feed him the football. And I don't look back with any remorse that the Bills traded away Stefon Diggs, even though that was a tough situation to navigate at the time. And so when you look at the players the Bills said goodbye to, whether they let them walk, they released them, or traded them away, I think the Bills did a good job with those assessments, or Brandon Beane did a good job with those assessments. All right, on the other side of it, we're going to look at the extensions that were handed out, free agency, and the NFL draft. Folks, be sure to stick with me. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. So here's what's going on here. They actually have a new feature that can help you write job descriptions. Then you can quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to get qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's go to the extensions now. The Bills extended Daquan Jones, 2 years, $16 million. And I'll tell you what, this doesn't look like a great choice. And the entire theme of last offseason was getting younger and cheaper. And then the Bills kind of made one exception, and it was Daquan Jones. That's the guy that was north of 30 that they wind up bringing back for a decent contract, 2 years, $16 million. That's starter money. That's good starter money. Not elite starter, right? They're not paying him like he's Dexter Lawrence, but, look, you expect him to be a good starting nose tackle. And, I think like you look back at that and maybe you wish that they didn't, you wish that was maybe spent somewhere else. He's fine, but he wasn't nearly the player that he flashed to be in 2024. And, I don't know that at his age, he's going to get that back. I think he's kind of who he's going to be. And maybe you wish that was one that the Bills let walk. They extended A.J. Epinesa 2 years, $12 million. I mean, A.J.'s, I think, a fine depth defensive end, but he kind of continued with the same arc. He certainly has his moments, can make a few splash plays, never really going to be an impact player in clutch situations. He's just a fine depth player that, you're paying a decent amount of money for. I'm not sad that he's back, but I think you can continue to watch A.J. Epinesa and recognize the moments, but wish there was more of them. Cam Lewis came back 2 years, $3.1 million. That's a slam dunk deal. Depth player at multiple spots in your secondary, good special teams player, helps you run this dime package that winds up being a pretty good personnel grouping for you at 2 years, $3.1 million. Absolute bargain deal. How about this one? Ty Johnson brought him back 1 year, $1.3 million. Winds up being a really good third down back for you. Some big time catches, your best pass blocking back. You'd have been in trouble if you didn't have Ty Johnson, because you wouldn't have had a pass blocker that can really hold their own when you need them against blitz heavy teams. And the Bills faced a ton of blitz heavy teams this year. Taylor Rapp, 3 years, $10.6 million. I think Taylor Rapp's a good football player. I don't think he's like an elite player, but a serviceable starter, 3 years, $10.6 million. The Bills' defense is at its best when he's on the field. We saw plenty of instances of this defense with and without Taylor Rapp. It's better when he's available. So I think that's a perfectly fine deal. David Edwards, this is a good deal. 2 years, $6 million. very much a serviceable starting left guard, smart football player, knows what everyone's doing, former quarterback, so he's got a great feel for the game. Is he a great starter? No, but he's a serviceable starter at 2 years, $6 million. There's no remorse there. Taron Johnson, the Bills extended 3 years, $30.75 million. I think Taron Johnson's an absolute stud of a football player. Had injuries this year, certainly a lot of moving parts around him at linebacker and at safety. And I thought he obviously had some very, very impactful moments throughout the season. Was it his best year? No, I don't think it was. But I think you look at him playing through injury, moving pieces around him, and you can kind of understand why maybe it wasn't quite the all-pro level performance that we saw last year, but still a lot of impact from Taron Johnson. Then they extended both tackles, offensive tackles. Dion Dawkins, 3 years, $60 million. Spencer Brown, 4 years, $72 million. Those are bargain deals. I think Dion Dawkins is a top 3 left tackle in the NFL, and he's at $20.2 million a season. You know, that's good for Buffalo. I think you're going to start seeing these tackles push mid to high 20s per season, and you got an elite one at that dollar amount. And then this Spencer Brown deal looks phenomenal. 4 years, $72 million. That's $18 million APY. I think Spencer Brown is firmly a top 5 right tackle in the NFL. And, I mean, you're seeing guys like Robert Hunt get $20 million a season at guard. Absolute steal. And I think that's kind of the gamble that Spencer Brown took when he took that contract. In fact, on Eric Wood's podcast, he recently said that, or Eric Wood recently said that Spencer reached out to him before the season and said, look, you know, should I take this deal? And Eric Wood said, you know, he encouraged him to take it. And now looking back, it probably cost him a few bucks at least. You know, obviously happy that Spencer Brown's back and for his development. But, you know, if Spencer Brown winds up hitting free agency this offseason like he was supposed to, first of all, I don't think that would happen because the Bills would at a minimum put a franchise tag on him. But if he were to hit the open market, there's no doubt in my mind Spencer Brown is every bit of a mid-20s APY offensive tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if he got $25 million a season on the open market. But the Bills got that deal done at $18 million APY, and I think it's an absolute steal. Those guys were phenomenal. If you're going to pay a tackle tandem, they need to produce like Brown and Dawkins did. Now, look, you want the penalties to go down. There's no question. And when we assess the offensive line, I'll talk more about that. But overall, those guys were phenomenal. They don't get any help. They play on an island. It's a phenomenal pair of tackles. And if you're going to pay a pair of tackles, they better give you that impact. And boy, they certainly do. So those are the in-house assessments. And I think overall, there's a good story to tell with how the Bills evaluated their own players and decided who to keep, you know, who not to keep, who to really commit to. I think there's a lot of very good when it comes to that. Now, I think where you could come away with a lot of questions is maybe how the free agency period went, how the NFL draft went, and we'll start to focus in on that right now. When you look at the veteran free agent additions that the Bills signed, you're probably wanting a little bit more than what you got here. Your big ticket player was wide receiver Curtis Samuel, 3 years, $24 million. And I give him some level of grace for the injuries, except for that was always part of the story with Curtis Samuel, injuries. So it's, you know, he misses a bunch of time, doesn't really get acclimated because of injuries. Well, I think that's part of what you sign up for. And that's your big ticket player. And I don't think he did enough to warrant that contract this year. Now, if he was healthy, maybe that would have been different because I thought there were certainly moments where he looked like a useful player. But again, when he has that injury history, it's part of the package. And you signed up for it. So you look back at last year, right? The Bills made one big ticket, right? Their biggest ticket free agent was Connor McGovern. Great story to tell there, right? Great story. We don't feel the same way. And when you have limited cap, it's not like the Bills are in position to go sign these big ticket players. Like when you go and give some decent cash to a player, you know, not great. And so you look at your two biggest, well, I wouldn't say your two biggest. Well, I guess as an expiring contract, Daquan Jones was the biggest contract they handed out because Taron Johnson, Spencer Brown, Dion Dawkins, those weren't expiring contracts. So for an expiring contract that you brought back and for an outside free agent that you signed in Daquan Jones and Curtis Samuel as $8 million APY players, not great, right? Not great at all. You'd like to have a lot more to show for that $16 million APY that you have invested in Curtis Samuel and Daquan Jones. Austin Johnson, defensive tackle, 1 year, $3.5 million. I thought he was a replacement level depth player, and you paid double a minimum contract for him. Doesn't look like a good deal in hindsight. Mike Edwards, the safety, boy, was that a flop. 1 year, $2.8 million. I think a lot of that's on Mike Edwards. I could tell you, based on some sources, that he didn't come in with any type of appetite to compete for a job and was pretty disappointed that there were other players that in Damar Hamlin and Cole Bishop that he was competing with and didn't give great effort and ultimately had to be released. So I don't know how you can anticipate that. Obviously, Mike Edwards came in with injuries himself, but certainly not a free agent signing that worked out. Here's one that did. Mack Hollins, 1 year, $2.6 million. I mean, there's been times this year where I've thought to myself, where would this offense be without Mack Hollins and the versatility that he offers, the down the field receiving, the blocking, just the personality that he brings to the football team. What a great signing that was. Mitchell Trubisky, 2 years, $5.25 million. I don't know if Mitchell Trubisky is actually a good backup quarterback. I'm glad that we haven't really had to see him play. Thank God for Josh Allen's durability, but obviously I think it's good to have your backup quarterback at a low cost and not have to see him play. So that works out, but boy, I'd be nervous if he had to. Dawon Smoot, 1 year, $2.5 million. I think obviously he had his own injuries throughout the course of the season. I think he was a fine fourth defensive end. Maybe if he was healthy, his impact would have been a little bit better. I don't have much remorse there. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 1 year, $2.25 million. Absolute flop. Lyle Collins, 1 year, $1.75 million. Absolute flop. Then you had like this bargain bin group of like Nicholas Moreau, Will Clapp, Kareem Jackson, Casey Toohill. I think those are all fine minimum contract guys, either on the practice squad for most of the season, a couple of them on the active roster for a while, provided veteran depth. I think those are fine moves. Then you have D. Delaney, Terrell Burgess, Chase Claypool, Dion Jones as veterans that you signed that never actually made your roster, wind up being inconsequential. But I think the reason I wanted to bring up a lot of those players that were bring up all of the players the Bills signed that were veterans is kind of look at the necessity to find bargains, right? That's exactly the world that the Bills lived in. And when you need bargains and your free agency, you come away with, okay, we like what we got from Mack Hollins. And, obviously that's about it. Maybe Dawon Smoot's decent. I think you needed to have a few more hits. I'm not talking about lots more Mack Hollinses, but you'd like to feel a little bit better that, hey, all these veterans that you wind up bringing in, it's ideally they would have been a little bit more impactful, at least a couple more of them. So I think this free agency class winds up not being very strong for Brandon Beane, especially when there needed to be some hits in the bargain bin, and you really didn't have much to show for it. All right, coming up next, the NFL draft, in-season moves, and then we'll summarize everything with where Beane nailed it and where he missed. Folks, be sure to stick with me. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game, where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. You pair that with one more correct pick, and you are cashing out. Also, check out the promos tab to tell any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of up to $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Are you looking for tickets for your next big event? Maybe last-minute tickets to the big game next week, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game. Finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache, but with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe the value. It was a steal, and the seat view feature is a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like in the venue. It is so reassuring. And the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, welcome back, folks. I want to talk about the NFL draft and then really kind of summarize where I think Beane really nailed it and where he missed. But first, before I get there, I'd like to remind you about the Substack, the Herd Mentality Substack. It's still going all year long. I've got quite the content calendar planned. I spent last week really developing my content plan for Locked On Bills and, of course, the Herd Mentality Substack, and very excited for what we have cooked up this week. You're going to get today, actually, if you're listening to this on Monday, later in the day today, you're going to get an article called The Release Repercussions, where I go through every single player on the roster and I tell you exactly what the cap consequences are if they were to release them. Yes, every single player under contract. So I know a lot of people have questions. Well, if the Bills move on from this player, what's the cap repercussion? Well, I'm going to have it perfectly laid out for you so you can reference every single player. And of course, I'll have plenty of analysis weaved into that. And then my midweek publish is going to be a deep dive into Dalton Kincaid. We're really going to break it down, all the analytics, the metrics, going to really put together some context that I think is important, project him moving forward, and, of course, there's going to be a film reel in there, all 84 targets. You'll be able to watch them in succession, and I plan on doing something very similar for Keon Coleman later in the week, so big-time content coming in the Herd Mentality Substack. There's a link in today's show notes for you to join and be part of that, and, of course, if you already are part of it, it continues all year round, and the content calendar that I have planned is really, really exciting. So look forward to continuing to deliver some written and film work in the Herd Mentality Substack. Okay, let's look at the NFL draft. The first pick was Keon Coleman, wide receiver. And we'll do some in-depth analysis on Keon Coleman. And look, he's a starter for this offense. And that's good. You like that. And I don't think that he's a starter for any other reason than they believe that he should get the volume of snaps that he got. And I thought there was a pretty good story to tell. There was a pretty good story unfolding until that Miami game, and he took the shot from Jordan Poyer and was never the same. And that's a problem. Yeah, I don't like the way that he responded to that. I don't like the way that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane talked about his return from injury. He needed to be better. And when his team needed him most, he was not very good. So you have to foil all of the momentum against a disaster finish. Now, obviously, he's got a whole lot of career left to write the story of Keon Coleman, but mixed bag in year one, and our lasting impression is not a good one. Second round pick, number 60 overall, safety Cole Bishop out of Utah. I'm glad the Bills didn't trade up for him, right? You watch some of the video coming out of the draft, and the Bills were actively trying to trade up to get Cole Bishop. Thank God that didn't happen. I don't know what to think of Cole Bishop. I think he obviously got a chance to play due to injury, not a preferred starter, had his moments, not a ton of impact, kind of got behind the eight ball to start the year with the injury during camp. I don't know. I don't know what to think of Cole Bishop. He's fine late in the season. I don't think his pairing with DeMar Hamlin is a good one. I think he pairs a lot better with Taylor Rapp. He's going to have to take a big step and be an answer for this team. And when you look at your top two picks as Keon Coleman and Cole Bishop, and you're not really sure that you have guys that are on a path to being, volume players, impact players, there's a lot to prove in those players. And I think that continues with your third pick, Dwayne Carter, the defensive tackle out of Duke. Obviously, his return from injury was pretty poor, but I was not impressed with him before the injury either. The one thing he was supposed to be able to do was rush the passer, and that was a disaster, and he certainly couldn't defend the run very well. So he's got a lot of work to do as well. So your top three picks, Coleman, Bishop, Carter. I am not really coming out of year one with a ton of optimism about any one of those three. A lot to prove. And you need hits. You need those guys to hit. All right, now we get a good story here. Fourth round, 128, running back Ray Davis out of Kentucky. I thought he had a great rookie season. No, he didn't come in and really claim a high-volume role, but the way that the Bills got all three backs going And Ray Davis being a part of that, of course, had the big start against, was it the Jets? Had a great game. Certainly made his share of plays. I'm left very satisfied with Ray Davis's rookie season and overall how the Bills got their running backs going. 5th round, 141 overall. Interior offensive lineman Cedric Van Pran Granger out of Georgia. Obviously didn't get a chance to play much. That's good, but promising preseason. Looks like a good developmental depth player for this offensive line. I think he's on a good path in the 5th round. 5th round, 160, linebacker Edifwan Ulafosio. Provided depth at linebacker. Some special teams, inactive a lot. I don't think there's a whole lot to glean other than he made the team and got a chance to play special teams, which I guess is fine for a 5th round pick. Also in the 5th round, 168 overall, edge rusher Javon Solomon out of Troy. Got a chance to really be an active player for most games, played special teams, had some opportunities to come in late in games, mostly blowouts and rush the passer. And his pass rush productivity is actually very good relative to the amount of snaps that he played. But, a few instances against the Miami Dolphins where he got a chance to play, in more of a neutral game script. He really couldn't hold his own at all defending the run. I think there's a lot of work needed there. But again, a 5th round pick that had some flashes, I think is decent. Here's the pick that I'm actually excited about. 6th round, 204 overall, offensive lineman Tylen Grable. He had a phenomenal preseason. He winds up winning the swing tackle job. Ryan Vandemark was the incumbent. He beats him out. Grable actually has an injury and comes back and then later beats him out again and reclaims that job. I'm excited about the trajectory of Tylen Grable. 6th round, 219, cornerback Daquan Hardy out of Penn State, the punt returner. Obviously didn't do enough in preseason to earn the job. He winds up getting released back on the practice squad. The Bills trade for Brandon Coddington. So we'll see what happens with Daquan Hardy, but obviously so far not looking good. And then they drafted the rugby player at 221 overall in the 7th round, offensive lineman Travis Clayton of course, didn't factor into the equation all season. If I'm not mistaken, he actually had a season-ending injury that probably allowed him to redshirt, and we'll see what happens there. So I think it's good that you have 8 of 10 draft picks make the team. You wind up having you roster 9 or 10 rookies for most of the year. All of that's good. But I don't know that you got nearly enough impact. I think Ray Davis certainly stands out. You had your moments from Keon Coleman. Cole Bishop was able to take some snaps as a starter. I'm not sure the impact was very good. Carter, some decent developmental offensive linemen. There's a lot that needs to unfold here for this draft to be a success. Then they made some in-season moves, and starting with trading for kick returner Brandon Coddington, that looks like a slam dunk. Looks like the Bills gave up not really anything to get him. He winds up doing a great job as your kick and punt returner, and I'm excited about him moving forward. Just don't let this guy play corner. Then they traded in season for Amari Cooper. So it's Amari Cooper in a 6 for a 3 and a 7. Amari Cooper helped this team. I don't know that he came in and provided a high volume piece of the offense. Obviously, he didn't. Certainly it doesn't help that he gets injured early in his tenure in Buffalo. That certainly hurts. But like Brandon Beane said, the offense was better when he was available. They scored 7 more points per game when he was available, and all of that's good. And the Bills have a decision to make there. And I think it'll probably be hard if he winds up leaving and you look back and say, was that worth a 3? I don't know. It's hard to reconcile that. They went pretty far. They went to the AFC Championship game. Do you wish he was maybe a bigger part of it? Could he have, if he was a bigger part, was there more success for the team to find? I think you'll be left wondering. And then they signed defensive tackles Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson. And look, I think Jordan Phillips came in and was a positive to this team. And when they needed some reinforcements at defensive tackle, they didn't trade for anybody after we certainly wanted that to happen. Dwayne Carter was injured. Jordan Phillips coming back and was helpful. And I think that's good. And then Quentin Jefferson was fine as a, very, very minimal snap taker late in the year. So where did Brandon Beane nail it? This is what I'd say. I think he nailed the in-house assessments. Not perfect, but I thought for the most part it was very, very good in terms of the players he let walk, the players he released, the players he traded, Diggs and Bates, and the extensions, Cam Lewis, Ty Johnson, David Edwards, Taron Johnson, Dion Dawkins, Spencer Brown. Thought the in-house stuff was phenomenal. And, that's something that Bill Belichick says all the time. You got to nail your in-house evaluations. Those are the players that you're around, that you see every single day. There's no guesswork. You know exactly who they are. You've got to get them right. And I think that's a good story to tell. The in-house evaluations were terrific. I think the offensive line, the whole deal there with, okay, David Edwards is going to become a starter at left guard. We're going to move Connor McGovern from left guard to center. We're going to cut Mitch Morse. We're going to trade Ryan Bates. We're going to draft some young players for depth. Perfect. Perfect job. Nailed that. I think the bargain signing of Mack Hollins was terrific. Trading for Brandon Codrington, terrific. And here's one that I think is underrated. Not panicking on Tyler Bass. Boy, were people hot about Tyler Bass. Way last year finished. When I say last year, now that's 2023. You know, the way camp went, the way preseason went. Thank God he didn't move on from Tyler Bass and incur $7 million in dead cap to bring in some other kicker, because it wouldn't have made a bit of difference in the season. Not a bit of difference. So great job not panicking on the Tyler Bass situation. Where did he miss? Well, I think the Daquan Jones contract. Daquan Jones is fine, but is he an $8 million nose tackle that's north of 30 when you're trying to get younger and cheaper? I don't feel like that aligns well. And when you look at AJ Epinesa and Daquan Jones, that's $8 million plus $6 million. That's what, 14. Then you give another $8 million to Curtis Samuel. That's now over $20 million APY tied up in Daquan Jones, AJ Epinesa, and Curtis Samuel. It's like, well, all right, there's your chance to get a big ticket player that maybe could have helped your team more or spread that around differently and get some more players. You know, I think that's where you kind of do the math and say, yeah, I don't know about that. I think in general, the free agent class was not very strong. Again, I know that they don't have a ton of money, but you needed to hit on bargain players. You needed your big ticket guy, Curtis Samuel, to be better. And I don't think that happened. And I think this NFL draft class is very much deserving of scrutiny and has to develop and evolve and show more than they did. Obviously, the book is not written after year one. And I think you go back to that class of 2022 when the Bills wind up getting Christian Benford and James Cook and Terrell Bernard and Khalil Shakir, and maybe you didn't feel great about that after one season, especially with Kyer Elam being the first-round pick. I'll look at it now. That's a big part of the nucleus of this team moving forward. So hopefully there's a good story to tell about this draft, but right now, not looking great. So, yeah, there's some black eyes for sure. There's some good stories to tell, a bit of a mixed bag. And, you know, transitional year and limited resources, team had a lot of success. I think the Bills had the capacity to go do it. I really do. But obviously, you know, they had to rely on a lot of young ascending players. They had to rely a lot on Josh Allen. They had to rely a lot on not making mistakes on offense and you know, taking away the ball on defense. You know, all that was part of the formula this year. And so I think it's all about how everything develops from here. And, you know, what does this draft class turn into? And how do you take advantage of the pill you swallowed, right? In terms of, hey, you had to get out of some contracts and move on and put yourself in a better cap position to write this next chapter of the Josh Allen era. All right, now what do you do now going into it? And I think we're entering this offseason hoping to find some difference makers, hoping to find some bargain in free agency, hoping to get some extensions done and for those to work out and ultimately improve this talent around Josh Allen so that we don't have to talk about another playoff exit. And we can finally talk about, you know, where the heck the Super Bowl parade's going to be. So that'll obviously be a big part of what we talk about this offseason. All right, folks, thanks for being here. Enjoyed this. Hope you enjoyed this conversation on Brandon Beane. Would love your thoughts. Hey, if you're on the YouTube, let me know what you're thinking. I know there's a lot of mad Bills fans out there. I've been hearing from you for the last week. It's been interesting to just see all the different opinions out there. But come on back. We got plenty of assessment to do this week. We'll look at the coaching staff, start to look at the players as well. This week, of course, we got a lot going on in the Substack as well. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.